watching Eye in Africa with me, Yeneli. Your headlines on the continent tonight. It's been a year since Zimbabwean strongman Robert Mugabe's death, controversial in both life and death. We take a look at how the country has been faring since. Hundreds of protesters in DR Congo demand the dismissal of Kigali's envoy in Kinshasa. Demonstrators accuse the diplomat of downplaying Rwanda's role in the Congolese wars. And a unique church in South Africa is celebrating the lifting of an alcohol ban. The Boozy community promotes the idea that drinking helps worshippers connect with God. This weekend marks 1 year since the death of longtime Zimbabwean strongman Robert Mugabe. Back then, throngs of Zimbabweans poured into the streets to celebrate his demise. 1 year on, many say they regret life under his rule. Wasim Kone has the story.
Years since the death of Zimbabwe's longtime leader Robert Mugabe, 3 years since he was forced to resign. And although many Zimbabweans had hoped his death would mark the beginning of a new and better era for the country, 12 months on, that hope has all but vanished.
No, I don't think it would be like this. He was far much better than our president.
These people in the town of Chitungwiza are waiting for their daily food handouts. Skyrocketing inflation, more than 730% this summer, has devastated the country's economy. The government's efforts to eliminate some of Zimbabwe's deficits have been successful. But that has come at the cost of a severe reduction in social services, health, water, and sanitation, as is clear in this part of Harare.
The balls are few, so there will be long queues. Thereby, it's a challenge to many to spend the whole day queuing for water. We don't have water even for washing, even for bathing, drinking.
The fight against corruption remains one of the biggest challenges for Zimbabwe.
When they came, one of the major promises was to deal ruthlessly with the issue of corruption, but we haven't seen a lot of progress around the whole issue of corruption. In fact, the perception from some
Current President Emmerson Mnangagwa has clamped down on dissent, arresting political opponents and journalists. The government insists there is no crisis in the country.
Hundreds of people took to the streets in the Democratic Republic of Congo, calling for the dismissal of the Rwandan ambassador. Police fired tear gas into the demonstration, injuring at least 2 people, but managing to break it up before it reached the Rwandan embassy. Protesters accuse Vincent Karega of historical revisionism. Back in August, Karega wrote a controversial tweet, one that demonstrators say diminishes the role Rwanda played in the Congolese wars.
tozosenga se justice pe réparation ya ba acte nyonso tu au Rwanda asala biso ozo comprendre donc acte nyonso Rwanda asala biso ozo na massacre o esalema til lelo toza réparer te.
And here in Paris, President Emmanuel Macron met his Ivorian counterpart, Alassane Ouattara. The meeting comes as Ouattara continues his controversial bid to seek a 3rd term in office. Paris had originally welcomed his decision back in March to not seek re-election, but after the sudden death of his chosen successor, the Ivorian president has thrown his hat back into the ring, leading to protests in Ivory Coast. For more on this story, earlier we spoke to Douglas Yates from the American Graduate School in Paris. We asked him what he makes of Macron's silence on Ouattara's re-election bid.
We know in December he had publicly congratulated Alassane Ouattara for stepping down and for not running for a 3rd mandate. So it's clear that his position is that he's against it. However, France has some entanglements with the regime. So it's not just that Ivory Coast is the major trading partner of France in the franc zone. But France also has a permanent military base with 900 troops stationed in Ivory Coast that it uses to launch operations in the war on terror. And also, for Macron personally, the Ivory Coast would be a pillar of France's effort to change the CFA franc and create something called the ECHO. And so Macron finds himself with a lot of other fish to fry, and it looks like he's going to remain silent for the Halloween election or re-election of Alassane Ouattara.
Time now for a quick look at other news stories we're following for you tonight on the continent. In Mali, the army says that militants killed 10 soldiers in Guiré, a town in the west of the country not far from the border with Mauritania. The attack took place on Thursday evening. It's the deadliest such incident against the Malian military since the coup, but it's not the first. Meanwhile, international powers and neighbours have been voicing their fears that instability could worsen after the ouster of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. The major rebel group in Sudan and the transitional government there have agreed to discuss peace. The Sudan People's Liberation Movement North's leader and Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok signed a letter of intention in Addis Ababa. A date for their talks has yet to be decided. The SPLMN is one of the groups that was not a part of the rebel alliance that already agreed to lay down their arms on Monday. It is a powerful faction that rules large parts of the country's south. And Nigeria is gearing up to welcome its first international flights in over 5 months. The country's airports have been closed to foreigners since March 23rd due to COVID-19 restrictions. It'll be a gradual reopening on Saturday, though. Nigeria has banned 10 airlines from touching down on its territory. Air France, KLM and Lufthansa are among those that are banned. The reason for this is that the countries these airlines belong to are banning Nigerian tourists. South African authorities lifted a controversial alcohol ban back in mid-August. Bars and restaurants welcomed the move, but more unexpectedly, so did one church. The Habola Church promotes drinking alcohol as a way to connect with God. Its critics, though, stress that its methods underestimate the dangers of alcoholism. Nicolas Germain has the story.
The Habola Church is unlike any other. Its members are allowed to drink during services. It welcomes all those who are barred from traditional and evangelical churches because of their drinking habits. Bars and restaurants serve as meeting venues. Habola is not a member of the South African Council of Churches. Its followers rejoiced when the government lifted a ban on the sale of alcohol mid-August. It had been imposed during the lockdown. The authorities said that thanks to the ban, there were more than 5,000 fewer admissions to trauma units per week. Members of the church say it's a place where they don't feel rejected by society.
At Habola, you get a chance to learn or to grow because you are amongst the people who are not judging you, who are allowing you to be who you are.
We have our life and God accepts us the way we are. I think so, and I know so, and I'm sure of it.
Critics of the church stress that alcoholism is a serious public health issue in South Africa. 1 in 10 deaths in the country is linked to alcohol. Only a third of the population drinks, but 60% of those who do are binge drinkers, according to the World Health Organization. South Africa also has one of the highest rates of alcohol-related road deaths in the world.
And finally, some good news coming from Kenya's Nakuru National Park. The park's famous pink flamingos have returned. Heavy rains had led to rising water levels of the lake there, which in turn drove the birds away. The colourful creatures were one of the main attractions of the park. Now they're back, much to the delight of visitors and rangers alike. That's it for Eye on Africa. Tonight's show was produced by Fraser Jackson and the team behind the cameras. Thank you for watching.
In 1953, at the height of the Korean War, millions of soldiers and civilians died. Few have since been identified. For the victims' families, the fight goes on, as the remains of their forebears have yet to be found. Many bodies are in the demilitarized zone that has separated the two Koreas since the end of the war. Today, our reporters are there to witness an event that's been 70 years in coming. Following a recent agreement between the two Koreas, the search has been renewed. The Korean peninsula has decided to unearth its past, the memories of war.
Revisited, presented by Stuart Norval on France 24 and France24.com.
I remember as a young journalist reporting on the closure of a factory, and I was told the factory's closed, that's the end of the story. But I spoke to people. I spoke to the security guards, I spoke to the workers, I spoke to the trades unions, I spoke to the people in the community, and I learned there was a different story. The story I was being told was the one I was supposed to publish. The story I found was a huge cover-up and a huge intrigue, and eventually, by exposing that, I actually managed to save those people's jobs. So I'm proud of that. And I'd urge every journalist to go further, go deeper, ask more questions, and don't just take the first thing that people tell you for the truth, because very often the truth is way beyond that. Find that truth.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.
These chicks may have only just hatched, but their days are already numbered, 42 to be exact. During their 6-week life cycle, their weight will increase at an astonishing rate, from just a few grams to nearly 3 kilos. Poland is Europe's leading poultry exporter. Last year, the country reared, slaughtered, and distributed more than 1 billion chickens. That's 10 times as many as a decade ago.
Our poultry doesn't just go to Europe, it also goes to the African and Asian markets, which makes Poland one of the world's market leaders.
On this farm in the north of Warsaw, 12 poultry houses are each home to 54,000 animals, meaning there are 23 chickens per square meter. Everything is automated, from the temperature of the hen house to the distribution of food and water. Each year, the farm goes through 6 chicken life cycles, an alarming rate for animal activists.
Imagine a 5-year-old child weighing 150 kilos. It's not natural. These chickens don't grow into healthy animals, they're sick. And what's of great concern to consumers is the current use of antibiotics on farms. There's a government report that shows inspections in poultry houses are a fictional occurrence.
Animal advocacy group Open Cages run a campaign entitled Franken Chicken, referring to Frankenstein's monster. Farmers acknowledge the use of antibiotics, but argue their use is carefully monitored and not systematic. However, with such high numbers of chickens in such a small area, it's impossible to monitor the health of each animal.
The vet comes every day. Sometimes there are 2 of them. They walk around the poultry houses and observe the behavior and physical well-being of the chicks. When there are problems, in the vast majority of cases, they are digestive disorders. There is no risk to the consumer.
On day 42, the chickens leave the factory for the first time and are taken to the slaughterhouse. The facility in Ujazdowek processes 750,000 chickens per day. The animals are killed, plucked, cut up, and finally packaged.
France 24 es rigurosidad, precisión y responsabilidad. Somos una familia comprometida con el periodismo y la verdad.
C'est une des seules chaînes d'infos où on nous laisse jouer en plateau avec des Legos, avec des robots, avec tout un tas d'objets.
We take a return ticket to revisit some of the key people and places of the last 50 years of world television news.
على فرانس 24 يمكننا أن نحاور أصحاب القرار من العالم في كل الميادين ولدينا المساحة لكشف ثنايا مسيرتهم.
Aquí en France 24 tenemos a varias personas de distintos países, algo que es un reflejo de cómo es Latinoamérica, con culturas muy distintas. Y allí es muy bonito encontrar que en el deporte todos tenemos algo en común.
Les femmes, elles sont souvent victimes de l'actualité internationale, mais ce sont aussi des actrices majeures de la géopolitique. Et d'ailleurs, on en parle dans France 24.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.